Hey, folks, welcome to this week's edition of Tech Sales Advice. I'm, of course, your host, Chris White, and this is the LinkedIn Live show for technical sales professionals and technical sales leaders. And, folks, I like to remind people these are live conversations. This is not pre-recorded. Here we are, the 3rd of March. And as I like to say, these conversations are by design, unscripted, unrehearsed, and unpredictable. I am particularly excited for today's conversation. And look, I love all the conversations I have with my guests, and my guests are so gracious to come and share their stories. Today's story is particularly inspiring. The gentleman who's with us today, he is a retired Army officer, and he wanted me to make it very clear that he was enlisted and then became a commissioned officer. As he liked to say, he did the job for a number of years, and then he told people to do the job for a number of years. He is now a principal solution engineer with Azure Security. His name is Rob Strawley, and we're going to hear his story of not only retiring from military and becoming a systems engineer and a sales engineer, but we're going to hear his story of picking up a book that happens to be a book that I'm relatively familiar with. It changed the way he thought about the profession. It changed the way he approached his day job, and the results have been spectacular. Rob, thank you so much for being here, sir. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate the fact that you reached out to me recently to tell me of your story. Welcome. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Chris. It's great to be here.
And interestingly enough, he's not too far away. I'm based here in Leesburg, Virginia. He's just up the road in Frederick, Maryland. For crying out loud, we could have almost done this in person. By the way, folks, I will take a pause every now and then, but as a reminder, we don't know who's out there. We do not see you. So if you do, feel free to chime in and say hello, please do so. And of course, if you have any questions for Rob or myself, please feel free to ask. Rob, I introduced you briefly. Do you mind taking just a minute and introducing yourself a little bit more broadly? And how did you go from the trenches in the field to systems engineer and solution engineer?
Yeah, it's a pretty long resume once I looked at it, right? So, so I joined the Army in 1992, fresh out of high school, as an infantryman. And then I went on tanks because I realized real quick that walking around with a rucksack was not as fun as in the movies. I got on tanks. I was an armored crew member, and instead of me carrying my weapon around, my weapon carried me around.
Love that.
But about I did 14 years enlisted, and it was about the mid-career point that I was like, being on tanks and doing things, running across the desert and all that's all fun, but there's no tank commander positions on LinkedIn. So I figured I'd better do something else, and I was like, hey, I built a computer or two. Maybe I'll be a signal officer. And so I went to what's called officer candidate school, which is where once you're enlisted, they accept you, you go through the school. And so I became a commissioned officer in the Signal Corps. But that wasn't enough for me. I was like, no, I need to learn more technical. So I became a technical officer. At the time, it was called Functional Area 53. And an actual position was Enterprise Systems Manager. And that's where I got exposed to what servers are and routers and server administration and all that. So I retired in 2014. I worked for one of the intelligence agencies as a contractor. My employer at the time paid for just about any SANS course I wanted. So I took all of that, and that's really where my cybersecurity training came in. And then, the next challenge was work for Microsoft. I'm always looking at roles that, is challenging. And so I started off as a consultant. Once I did that for a couple of years, I did the Azure CXP, which is kind of like CSS for classified networks. Never wanted to be sales. Never ever thought about sales.
And that is such a common theme for so many people that get into the profession. So many people say, I never wanted to be in sales. I never thought I would be in sales.
Nope.
Keep going. Keep going.
So I looked around. I'm like, what else can I do? You know, I mean, at a certain point, you're like, I've hit all my life goals. Here I am at Microsoft. You know, it's like, okay, what do I do next?
What next? Yeah.
So sales, here I come. Let's do it. Let's master it. And so I was a technical specialist. I mean, that's what the role was called at the time. And, you know, my job was to get the technical win. And then the sales partner, as you call it in the book, their job was to close the deal.
Yep. And when did you take that? When did you first take that technical specialist role?
That was about 19 months ago.
Okay. So just under 2 years ago. All right.
Yes.
And so now you're in the role, you're a technical specialist. You never wanted to be you never thought of yourself as a sales professional. You never thought you'd be a sales professional. Was there some point in that 19 months where you just found yourself feeling like, okay, I'm doing something wrong. I feel like I'm burning out. I feel like I'm not hitting my stride yet. What were some of the symptoms, but before you started looking around for books such as mine?
Yeah, I was working 60 hours a week easily. You know, I was working weekends just to keep up because the breadth of knowledge that the role required at that time was the entire security stack. So anything you can think of, Azure Security, Entra, Defender this, Defender that, that was all under me. So, you know, that requires a lot of work. And it wasn't that really got me. It was, you know, why am I still running out of time on when I'm doing demos? You know, it's like you go through everything and it's like just something I wasn't sure that I left everything on the table. You know, we all think we're good. You know, I thought I was good at what I do, you know, but there were still things I'm like, why do I feel like I had to rush towards the end to get to the point?
Right.
You know? And it was like, what am I doing wrong?
Yeah.
And so a teammate just suggested this book one time. We were both talking about our problems. You know, it's like, man, this is tiring. And he goes, well, I just bought this book. And he says, it's called The 6 Habits. And I was like, okay. No. So he sent me the Amazon link and he goes, I haven't read it yet, but I'm looking through the table of contents. He's like, this is almost everything you already do. I said, okay. So I bought it and it sat behind me for 2 days. And then I picked it up. Well, you know, and I was like, okay, I got some time coming up. So I picked it up, started reading it on a Friday night. And I kid you not, I did not put it down until I finished it Sunday evening. It was that good because all the possible things that could go wrong in your book, I'm like, yeah, that just happened last week. And so it just, the book, you know, I think the magic of the book is that it's so simple. It's like there's no, you know, there's no algorithm to figure out. But and I'm reading, I'm like, okay, that makes sense, you know. And I think the very first chapter really set the tone. Is yes, you are technical, but guess what? You are sales now.
Right?
Like, no. No. But no, yeah. Once you get past that, you know, and you realize, because I told you before, I did read the first part. I skipped the first habit of the relationship. I wanted to get right to discovery because I was like, this is where it is. But then I went back and read the relationship, and even though I had a good relationship with all the sales partners I'm assigned to. Yeah. I didn't think I really needed to read it, but I was like, you know what, you wrote it, so I'm going to read it. And I read it last. I'm like, wow, that's actually a pretty good breakdown of how we think differently, you know, and our motivations are different. You know? So yeah, just the book was just spot on, and it did help me reset not only the way I think about things, but the way I do things. And I was getting burned out. But now that I do things different, I'm actually having fun.
Mm. So I want to just pause for just a moment. First of all, Rob, obviously, I so appreciate the kind words that you have to say about the book, and it's a thrill for me to hear that not only did you like it, and that's fine, but that it's actually made a difference for you. But I want to call attention for everyone's sake. I didn't invite Rob here to say nice things about the book. What I invited him here to do is talk about what has happened since, and some of the specific changes that he has made in the way he goes about his business and the results that he has seen. So Rob, and by the way, let me just say hello real quick. Cliff Barcliff. Cliff, I think you're the only person maybe on the planet who attends every single one of these, or at least says hello every time. So Cliff, as always, and by the way, he's down in Richmond, Virginia. He's not too far away. Cliff, it is always good to see you, my friend. Thank you for being here. And by the way, if anybody else is out there, if you care to say hello, please feel free to do so. And of course, if you have any questions for Rob or myself, we'd love to hear from you. So Rob, you picked up the book, you read it, you're sort of checking up like, yep, been there, done that, okay. And it sort of changed your mindset, and then it's changed some of how you were operating. Let's talk about some of those changes that you made in a very visible, a very tangible manner.
Yeah, the first customer that I tried the new techniques on, I got with the sales partner. I said, hey, listen, I read this book. I want to try this thing called discovery.
That just, I mean, I can't help but laugh. I mean, that's just, that you're going to your sales counterpart saying, I want to try this thing called discovery. Anyway, carry on. I just love it. That's, I love handing out chips. That's where I would be tossing you a 6-ounce chip for that. Go ahead.
And once I explained it to her, she's like, yeah, that makes sense. Let's do it. And fortunately, the sales partner, she's a phenomenal salesperson as well. She's experienced, and she's like, this is what we should be doing. I was like, okay. So the first customer I tried it on, they only wanted to talk about a certain thing, right? They said, we don't want to talk about anything but this. I was like, okay. And by asking open-ended questions, I actually discovered at the end of the meeting, I actually discovered 9 additional sales opportunities that we didn't know about before, because they didn't talk about it before. And additionally, for the next demo, I actually got the customer to realize that they wanted to shift their priorities. And so amazing. I was able to get them to agree they actually asked for it. Not that they agreed, they actually asked, because I said, okay, with everything we just discussed, what is your priority of what you want to see next? And they said, actually, we want to see this other thing that you talked about. I said, okay.
Amazing.
So the thing that we do with the sales partners, we always do a debrief afterwards. And I had a teammate on too. And we talked about it, and I actually recorded this as kind of a training event. And what I did was, for the rest of my teammates, I rewatched it, broke it down by seconds and minutes. When opportunity number 1, opportunity number 2, customer talks about this project, so it's like identifying. And so I'm proving out the value of this discovery. And amazing. That's when we all realized, hey, we're onto something here.
Amazing.
There's been situations where I haven't even had to demo anything. It's just having a conversation. I think that's the biggest thing, is don't just show up and throw up like you talked about in the book, right? All I do is I simply ask a few questions in the beginning. And the one most important question is, what is most important to you? Yeah. What is it you want to talk about? And I don't demo anything. I don't ask any other questions. If I can't tie it back to the original problem, then I'm not going to go and stretch, because now I'm getting into what things I used to do. I'm getting into bad habits of just, let me show you this. Why? They didn't ask for it.
Yeah. Amazing. Rob, let me push our pause just for a moment. Dustin Littlefield from Minneapolis. Nice to see you. And Mr. Chris Mabry from New York. Chris, I'm inspired to invite you to think back, what, 4 or 5 years ago when you first came on this show. You were a sales engineer, an individual contributor, similar to where Rob is, and you came and talked about your experience as an SE on this show, and look where your career has gone. And not because of that by any stretch of the imagination, but that was certainly a moment that I think helped you sort of build some confidence. So Chris, always good to see you, my friend. So Rob, the whole point, or the whole idea, that you went to your account executive and suggested this thing called discovery, and they clearly leaned into that, and then it started opening up new doors. I mean, it's humorous to me because it's like it's almost like, shocker, but of course it did that. I'm inclined to invite you to reflect back on what was the MO before you started making some of these changes. How were you and your sales counterparts approaching deals? Was it pretty much they would have some sort of conversation with the prospect or customer? They would bring something to you and say, okay, we need to demo these things, and then you would sort of kill yourself trying to come up with the perfect and complete demo, and then do your best to dump as much as you could. Is that sort of the MO before this transition?
Yeah, I was demoing products, not solutions. I was showing them every possible feature, the latest and greatest that came out. Oh, you can do this, you can do this. And I actually would go systematically down the left-hand side of the blades, and say, okay, this is what this does. This is what this, and even when I did this in person, I would do the same thing. And I would look over, and again, referring back to your book, I noticed that certain individuals were tuning out, checking their email, or, not paying attention, or whatever the case is. And it's not that they were being rude, it's just didn't interest them. I mean, anybody would be like that. If I'm not interested, I'm going to be checking email, whatever the case is.
Of course.
So there was, and that was one of the things I was struggling with, is how do I get interaction, other than asking. And the other thing was, I was asking the wrong questions. I was asking yes or no questions, and I've realized there's no value in this. So I don't ask yes or no questions anymore. I ask, how does this resonate with you? How does this work? How do you see yourselves using it? Something along those lines. I don't ask yes or no questions there because they're not really value. They're just saying yes to just go along the flow.
Right. It's really amazing to see this transformation that you've gone through in those moments as you reflect before, in those moments where you were giving a demo and you saw either people checking their email or you sensed that people were tuning out. If in those moments, did you feel like, oh my gosh, I feel like I've lost them, but just lack the skills or the confidence or the know-how or the knowledge to do something about it?
Yeah, I think I just didn't really have a good technique, because maybe I was really only targeting one person, right? But now I include everyone, even if there's a CISO, right? That's the person everybody wants to target.
Of course. Yep.
But I've also learned, because I've been a SOC analyst myself, I was like, demand bubbles up. And if I can get the analyst on board with, hey, this is going to make your life a little easier here. I've been there, alert fatigue. I've been the guy that gets that phone call at 2 a.m. Something's happened. If I can make your job easier, then you're going to go to your boss and say, hey, this is a lot better than what we're currently doing. I would like to have this. So with the book, with a lot of your recommendations, is I find myself paying attention a lot more to who's who. I didn't worry about it before. I really didn't. The account executive, they knew who the people were, and really, I knew the CISO, maybe the director of managers, but I didn't really care at the time, because as far as I knew, I just demoing a product, and if you like it, cool. If not, all right, well, move on to the next one, I guess. But now it's like I said, I'm having fun because now it's like it's not even about, oh, can we afford it? I want them to say, how can we not afford this?
Mm,
That's the question I want them to ask themselves.
mm,
Not can we afford it? How can we not afford it?
yeah.
Because I do have certain tricks that I won't divulge here, but in case my competitors are watching.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I don't want you to. I don't want you to give away any secret sauce. There's something you've said a couple times that I want to double click on because Rob, this is such an important aspect, frankly, of why I wrote the book and why I do what I do. You've mentioned I'm having more fun. And I say this before every workshop that I run. This is not just about being more successful. And there's no doubt that it's a big part. That's a big part of it. A big part of it is we want to be more successful in the field. We want to close more deals. And at the end of the day, that puts a little more, coin in our pocket in most cases. So that's a big part of it. But a bigger part of it is job satisfaction. We are more I believe first we are most satisfied when serving other people and feeling like we're serving other people. We're far more satisfied in the role and we're having more fun when the conversations are meaningful and engaging. And frankly, we're far less likely to burn out. Now, one of the things that you mentioned is that you were working 60 hours a week, you were killing yourself.
Yeah.
You shared with me the other day that as a result, you almost feel like you're doing less work, but achieving more as a result. How is it that you're doing less work?
For one thing, I've just eliminated a lot of stuff off my calendar that if it doesn't pertain to sales or if it doesn't pertain to me learning something, like we're coming out with features all the time, right? I make more time through the week now to actually build my demos. Like I used to just wait until the weekends and spend all day doing demos and all that, but I block off time during the week now. Just hey, don't bother me. I'm doing this, and it's blocked off. So I spend more time, which to that point, the point of discovery is to scope my demo. So the discovery, now I know what the customer wants to see. So I'm not doing this whole, oh, click here, click that, click all the clicks, right? I do that. I practice. So not only do I use the worksheets that you have on your website. Matter of fact, with Discovery, I use AI to actually format the responses, and I copy and paste into the worksheets. That's if the customer allows you to record and transcribe, of course. So a lot of what I do now is a lot quicker, more efficient. But getting back to the demos, I only build what the customer wants to see.
What a concept, right?
Yeah. And they pay attention through the whole thing. And then questions are related to that, and in your book, you talk about these stragglers that come in and ask off the wall questions that have nothing to do with it because maybe they weren't there during the first meeting. I can only remember since I've been doing this discovery. Of course, I do an agenda slide that I think Carrie mentioned in a course. I do an agenda slide first, and that's how everyone knows, okay, this is what we agreed to. This is what we're going over. Unless it's the CISO, you have questions, we're going to, I'll follow up maybe afterwards. But yeah, the demos are much. So it's a little more work because I'm doing more custom demos. But the presentation, the actual demo is shorter and it's more effective.
Right.
So I'm not just spinning wheels, right?
Right.
I was spending all this time doing demos and building demos that was standard. Now I'm actually honing in. Like I'll even change the subscription to the customer name and upload their logos. So I want them to see what it would look like in their environment.
Absolutely.
And that has made an impression.
Yeah. One of the things I think I hear you saying is you're being far more efficient.
Yes.
And at the same time, you're being more effective. And it's because you're involved and engaged in discovery. You're taking that to really shape the narrative, the presentation, the demonstration. And rather than trying to go broad brush, you're focusing on what do they care about? What are they trying to achieve? And let's just make it about that and make it about them.
Yeah, and if they want to learn something else, then I'd make a judgment call. Either I can go into it because they asked, or if it does require some other setup, I'll say, hey, why don't we do a follow-up so that way I can properly set it up for you. And I can see where some people would be like, oh, that's another meeting that might turn off customers. I haven't seen that yet. I haven't seen that yet at all. Like more meetings means they're interested, more interested.
Amazing. By the way, Cliff just mentioned, and I love this, one-time saver, use LinkedIn or just emails to introduce yourself before the meeting. Yeah, and thank you for that, Cliff. I tell all the folks that I work with, if you've been invited to a meeting and you see the list of names that are going to be there, I think that is green light to reach out to them and say hello and, send a connection request and just say, hey, look forward to seeing you on the demo. So I could not agree with that more. Rob, I'm curious to hear how some of your sales counterparts, and I don't recall if you call them account executives or there's SSPs or there's another name for the sales side that you work with. How have they responded? Has it been received with open arms by everybody? Or are there some people who have received it with open arms, this new Rob, this new approach, and maybe some that are still sort of slower to get on board with the train?
I'll word it this way: there hasn't been any pushback.
Fabulous.
But I'll say this: the ones that interact with me the most and do the most discoveries are doing the best.
Yeah.
But with that, I do pushback, and if they say, hey, we got a demo, I was like, okay, when's the discovery meeting? I don't do demos without discovery. That is my rule.
Yep.
Because when I explain to them, discovery does two things. A, it helps me scope the demo. B, it helps the sales partner identify those additional sales opportunities that we didn't know previously. So it benefits both of us.
Yeah.
Right. And so, like I said, I haven't had pushback, but not everybody follows it like I would like. Let's put it that way.
Or not everybody's going to follow it to the extent you might expect, and that's reasonable, right? I mean, certain people are going to be maybe a little bit more cautious than others. Some people are very entrenched. Some people may be used to quote the old Rob, and now this new Rob is sort of altering their worldview a little bit. So
we've only been doing this a month and a half, so it's still new too.
Still relatively new. Right. Yeah. So in a month and a half, how has you mentioned you're having more fun. How has your confidence level changed? Has it changed the way you feel entering meetings?
I was always confident because, we all think we're good at what we do. I would say I have better direction of where, because you can still form the narrative. You can still form the conversation by asking the right questions and allowing the customer to respond. You can kind of guide it the way you want it to go, as long as you're not, too pushy and not, too salesy. There's a reason for the meeting, right?
Yeah.
So there's a reason for the meeting.
Right.
I think the biggest thing for me is I was always looking for ways to tell a better story, right? Oh, everything's about storytelling. Okay, well, trying to find content on how to do that better. And that's where I was struggling. I knew that was a key that I was weak in, is storytelling. Well, what I discovered was that if you do discovery the correct way, you don't need to tell a story. The customer tells a story. They tell their own story. I've had customers air their dirty laundry. I've had customers just open up like we haven't had them before. And it's because get away from the sales, get away from the product names. I don't talk about product names unless they specifically ask about it.
So there have been a couple of moments in the last 30 minutes or so that you've shared a very quotable quote. One of them that I wrote down is, I was demoing products, not solutions. And that's one of the things that changed. The other thing you just said that's worth double clicking on is, if you do discovery, you don't need to tell the story. The customer will tell the story for you.
Yep.
And that is so powerful. Let's do the right discovery so that when it's time to tell the story we tell is actually their story. Yep. And how our solution fits into their story. Rob, let me just push our pause button for just a moment in case any of you have just recently joined here in the past few minutes. I'm speaking with Rob Strawley. He is a principal solution engineer with Azure Security. He is a retired Army officer who got into systems engineering and then became a sales engineer a couple of years ago. And after recognizing that he was burning out and not hitting his stride the way he wanted to, he stumbled upon a book called 6 Habits, and that has turned it changed his mindset. It's changed the way he approaches the job. And it has meant a significant increase in job satisfaction and performance in the job. And we're just hearing Rob tell a little bit about his story. Rob, I'm curious. You mentioned burnout, and we talked about the fact that you feel like you're certainly not working as hard, and it's a little bit more it's a little bit more focused, a little bit more intentional. What has it done in terms of your calendar and the number of meetings? Are you being invited into more meetings? Are you attending less meetings, or are they just more focused and intentional? Let's talk about the actual deal volume that you're supporting.
Yeah, that's a good question. I won't say that the volume has changed, because the customer base is the customer base. I do have slightly more meetings, but that's my own doing. Because if I have a meeting, I will block off 30. Well, it's not really a meeting. I'll block off 30 minutes prior, because I don't like back-to-back meetings anymore, because I'm not doing a standard demo. So I need to get in the right frame of mind.
You need time. Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. The other thing is, with the sales partners who are the most successful, we stick to a debrief after every discovery, because there has been cases where a teammate of mine, another solution engineer, hears something, the sales partner hears something, I hear something, and I say, well, they said they don't have the budget for this. I'm thinking this, and they're like, no, we heard this. I'm like, okay, yeah, I can see that. So it's a kind of a consensus, but you gotta have that relationship with your sales partner. And you got to respect each other. And so there has been cases where we talk about it, we come up with a plan forward. And then even after a demo, we don't always have time for demos, but we do make time for debriefs after discovery. That's like non-negotiable.
Yeah. Rob, there might be some people who are listening to this right now, or maybe listening to the recording, who might find themselves thinking, well, this just all seems very basic stuff. I mean, this is all just fundamental stuff. Like, what's the magic here? What would you say to that person who says, well, this all just sounds sort of basic and obvious and fundamental?
It's true, and yet so many people have purchased your book, so obviously we're not doing it. I mean, like I said, there was always, it is very simple. And once you start reading it, it was like, why didn't I think of that? It is simple tweaks and it's subtle things that make a big difference. I tell my teammates, less is more all the time. Less is more.
Amen.
And same with demos. Less is more.
MVD, minimum viable demo.
Yep. And I think that's why it resonates with so many people. Like, you don't need a degree in organizational, reorganization efficiencies or whatever. This is stuff that we all do. We just needed somebody to say, hey, dummy, why don't you do it this way? And that's how simple it is. And it's No, go ahead. No, I was just saying, we can be as technical as we want. We can know the product in and out, but if you don't know how to present it effectively, it doesn't matter if you know all 100 features of it. Customer only wants to know one or two. And if
Bingo.
you miss the mark on that and you're focusing on another thing, well, you completely wasted your time and the customer's time.
Amen. Well, and getting back to this idea that it's basics and the fundamentals, it is, and as I like to say frequently, it's common sense. It's all common sense. It's not always common practice, and therein lies the difference. There are certainly a few other thoughts that I have, and then I want to talk a little bit about how you've now taken this and you've in essence created sort of your own, let's call it, internal movement there within Microsoft, and you've got a lot of momentum going around that. So I want to talk about that a little bit more. What would you say to other people who maybe are considering this profession, who maybe are where you were, let's say 3, 4, 5 years ago, particularly maybe even other retired officers or veterans from the military thinking about getting into this profession? What advice might you have for them?
If you've ever had to brief 3 courses of actions for a mission, you're selling something. You're a salesman. You are selling you are strategizing what order you want the course of action to go, right? We all know how it's done, military decision-making process, all of that. So you have all that training. And don't forget, if you're an NCO, non-commissioned officer, in those leadership schools, they teach you presentation skills. So I've had a bunch of building blocks up to this point from the military, from previous roles. I guess I've been building my sales acumen, and I think that's the other part of it, is that you can read the book, but it does take some sales acumen. You got to have kind of sales type of mind. You can't just be technical. Not in this role. Sales engineer, first chapter, we are sales. And that's what this is. And that's what I found most challenging. So getting back to your question, if you're a military officer or any type of leadership where you had to brief something, I've had to brief in front of the what they call the CARB board. I forget what they call it, but basically the non-technical people who have to make decisions on budgets that you request for, IT licenses and stuff.
Yeah.
I had to go in front of them and convince them that, yes, we really need this money because XYZ.
Yeah, the architecture review board or what have you. Yeah.
All the budgeting, all the people that don't know anything about an IP address, right? They're the ones that we have to convince. So you actually have those skills. You just may not be aware that it is a sales skill.
Yeah. Well, and it reminds me, I'll make a plug for another book by a much more famous or well-known author than me, Daniel Pink. He wrote a book called To Sell is Human. And that's really what you're talking about. And in this situation that you're referring to, they're not selling products, but they are selling ideas. And so to your point, if you've ever had to stand in front of a 5-star and make a pitch, you are in fact selling. You're just selling an idea, right? Yeah. And so I do think that's really insightful. So you've created, as a result of your experience reading the book, going through the certification program, you've now created something internally called ESP. I'll invite you to share what is ESP, and I love the tagline, so I'll invite you to share the tagline, and how are you starting to promote this internally?
So when I was going through this process, I knew in order to catch on, it needed something simpler, right? To keep saying 6 habits of successful, highly effective engineer.
Right. It's too much of an earful, too much of a mouthful.
Yeah. I mean, you could just say 6H, but I wanted something that was catchy and that was more relatable, because I knew in order to get the rest of my team on, I needed the sales partner to recognize the value. And for them to say, hey, this is helping me close my deals quicker and more, than I'm previously. So I needed that to come up from the sales partners. And so I came up with ESP, enhanced sales process. And yes, I used ESP. It was kind of a joke at first because I was like, well, an intro, let's come up with ESP. But the frame of mind I was thinking was, we are seeing the hidden through discovery, and influence the future is the other tagline, meaning closing those deals faster, right? So you are influencing the deals that are closing, and through discovery, you are uncovering things that you didn't know before. I've proved it. I've proved it almost every meeting I go into. I'm like, oh, write it down. Didn't know that one, or even just a structure of who's who, or uncovering, hey, there's a CISO leaving. There's a new one coming in. This one's more friendly to us than the other one, or vice versa. It's just things that you are starting to see that you didn't know going into the meeting. And so, yeah, I call it ESP, enhanced sales process.
Well, and I was going to say, I just love the tagline. What is it? See what's hidden.
See the hidden. Yeah. See what's hidden. Influence the future.
See what's hidden and influence the future. It's a fabulous tagline. And as a result, what would you say? Not just the 6 habits, but what would you say are the cornerstones of the process that you're trying to introduce and drive internally? I'm assuming it's discovery, it's getting aligned as an AESE in terms of the process, the approach, the strategy, the narrative, more customization of the narrative. You mentioned less, not more. And then once you've delivered, re-engaging or circling back and debriefing, is there any other piece of it that I'm missing there?
Well, so through the email chain, and this has blown up a lot faster, a lot wider than I expected. It's almost surreal, like the level of visibility this has within our leadership. But through the email chain and distro, I found other people who have also read the book, and they're like, yeah, this is great. I didn't know you read the book too. And so a couple of us got together, and we've actually created a bi-weekly meeting where we will actually go over the 6 habits. And then over the course of the next couple months, we'll go over all of them. But then from that point on, we're going to do a monthly kind of like a mind meld, if you will, to, hey, if anybody has any, problems, or maybe you recorded the demo, you want us to critique it, and just things to just talk about, if they're struggling and having it, because not everybody's going to read the book. Some people are going to be different parts of the book, started here. Yep. And so we just kind of want to encourage people to read it by having an open conversation. You got to set aside your egos. There's no hurt feelings here. This is just good, bad, and ugly, whatever you want to talk about. How can we help you? And I won't say it's instructional because neither one of us are experts at this, but it's more along the lines of open dialogue. Just like I did with my team, criticize, constructive criticism for me and vice versa. We all grow through honesty,
Yeah. Why do you suspect it has, quote, caught fire internally more so than expected?
Half because it just makes sense. And the other half is a lot of the sales partners like, this is how we did it in a previous company. This is how we need to be doing it, or something similar to that. But bottom line is, the ones that are on board are like, yeah, why are we not doing it this way? This makes so much sense. Because they're struggling too, right? They have some of the same challenges that we do. How do you close the deal? Why aren't the conversations getting further than what they are? It's not always just price.
Yep, exactly. We're believe it or not, and I told you the time was going to go by pretty quickly. So we're already 45 minutes into the conversation. I feel like it feels like we just got started. And by the way, let me just pause again, folks. If there are any of you out there who care to say hello or care to ask Rob any questions, please feel free to do so. We're talking about his journey over the past couple of years through going from a military officer and a commissioned officer in the Army to a systems engineer to a sales engineer. He's recently gone through the 6 Habits experience and certification, if I can use that term. And it's really changed the way not only he approaches the role, but it's completely and totally changed the results that they're actually seeing in the field. And now he's actually rolling out an internal version that he calls ESP, see the invisible and influence the future. No, see what's hidden and influence the future.
Yeah, ESP, enhanced sales process.
There you go. Enhanced sales process. So there's probably 1 or 2 more questions that come to mind, Rob, and then we'll begin to wrap things up. As you mentioned, there are a lot of people that have read the book. There's a lot of people that have gone through the certification. I would say very few people have had the immediate return on investment, if I can use that term, or instant turnaround that it seems like you have had, which tells me there's something unique about you. There's something unique about either your background in the military, or you have you already had certain skills, you already had certain talents. I'm just wondering, and I'm inviting you to self-reflect. What do you think? What do you think made this so, if I can use this word in a very positive way, explosive for you? I figure that's a term that a tank guy could appreciate. Why do you think? What is it about you that just do you think caused this to be the spark that really lit the fire?
Positive thinking, being confident. When I set my mind to something, I do it, and it's easy when you have results. Like I said, the first meeting I did was proving it out. The second significant event was I covered down on somebody who was on paternity leave, wasn't even my customer, never talked to him. I did a mini discovery with his team, and we knocked it out of the park. I can't say too much on that, but it's one of the largest deals we've had. I'll just put it that way. And I won't get compensated on it, but but to prove out was worth it to me. It's like, wow, I did it with a customer wasn't my customer, never talked to him, but I used the mini discovery, but it was the demo, doing exactly what they were asking for. And that was through talking with that sales team, not my sales team, that sales team. So I think just do it, read the book, it makes sense, and just put it into practice. But I will say this, pick a sales partner that you have the closest relationship with.
That's good advice.
Start there, get another team member on board. So now you have someone else that you can bounce off and also prove out. And work until you get that 1 or 2 main wins, and then you can expand it to the rest of the team. Because otherwise it's just another process, right? That people are like, okay, yeah, here's another one. But if you have tangible evidence, and that's what I had to, it took me a couple of weeks, it took me about 3 weeks. I just look at the draw, right? The guy was out, I took over that. And that was probably the key moment that people started taking notice. Like, how did you do that? Like, well, yeah. It's funny you asked. Let's talk about this.
Yeah. Well, and here's what I'm reading between the lines a little bit. And I so respect this, Rob. You weren't afraid to give it a try.
Right.
You weren't afraid to try something new. I've got nothing to lose. I've got everything to gain. So why don't I try something different? And I think that's one of the biggest barriers. Whether it's my book or anybody else's book, you hear a good idea, you see a good idea. Maybe it's something you read on LinkedIn. I think people, more times than not, they hear a good idea and it sounds good, but I don't know. There's some risk there. There's some fear there. And what I hear from you is, you said, heck, I'm going to give this a try.
Yeah.
And that's what made all the difference for you. So I have to give you a tremendous amount of credit for that. By the way, Cliff asked a question, and I'll let you go wherever you care to go with this. You and I had some discussion around this. Where do you see yourself a few years down the road? Do you seek either SE management, another role? How are your plans to get there? I'll let you answer that to the extent you care to answer that, Rob.
Yeah, that's a good question. I do see myself in another role eventually that takes advantage of all of this. I'll just leave it at that.
Leave it at that. And I can share a little bit more broadly. Rob has shared with me that he's in constant growth mode. And so people who are in constant growth mode, they are typically seeking to increase their level of influence and mastery on a constant basis. So my guess is wherever you go and whatever direction you go in, it's going to be seeking greater mastery and greater influence in that role. Is that a fair way to phrase it?
Yeah, I want to take this process and prove that it works in that role too.
Yeah. Awesome. Excellent. Cliff, as always, thanks for the question. Rob, we're just about out of time. As I like to say, the landing gear is out, the runway is in sight. We're going to land this plane on time. So people, seat backs up, put the tray tables up, buckle up the seat belts as we bring this plane to a stop here. Any final thoughts from you, Rob, as we wrap things up? Was there anything in particular you were hoping that we might cover that we haven't had a chance to discuss?
I just want to say one of the other things to my success is practice. How do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice. And that's why I said I block off time during the week to not just build new demos, but I will go over constantly. When I travel, I do it in the mornings, right before the meetings. I go over, click all the clicks, because in demo environments, we all know things just sometimes doesn't work. So you want to make sure you prepared for that. But that's probably the other thing that I always did practice, but your book kind of reinforced that. Okay, man, at least I'm doing that right. Of all the habits, at least I'm doing that.
Amen. And by the way, just a few more comments from Cliff. He said, "Nothing succeeds like success." Well said. People want to follow success. And then he just made a comment: sales enablement is a great alternative path for SEs. And I can certainly sense some sales enablement stink on you, if I can use that term in the nicest possible way. So, Rob, first of all, thank you so much for being a guest here on the show. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. Of course, I appreciate the kind words that you've said about the book and the material, but more importantly, your story is one worth hearing, whether it's somebody picking up my book or somebody picking up any other book in this particular profession or in any other profession. The intentionality with which you have displayed wanting and seeking a better way, finding some material that worked for you, taking the risk of putting it to the test out in the field and then seeing the result, and then now rolling it out internally to make your colleagues and your organization better. That's a story worth telling. It's a model worth replicating and following. So kudos to you, my friend. Really well done. So I appreciate you being here so much. And I know you've invited me to come chat with some of your colleagues on Thursday. So I can't wait to have the opportunity to do that. Rob, fair to say that if anybody has caught this either live or the recording, you'd welcome them to reach out and connect on LinkedIn?
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Rob, hang around backstage just for a moment. We're hanging around. We'll say farewell backstage. To those of you who stuck around for the live session, thank you so much for being here. If you caught the recorded session, thank you so much as well. If you're not already, I invite you to follow Tech Sales Advice on LinkedIn to be alerted to these sessions. And of course, you can go to techsalesmastery.com to learn more about the work that I do. Rob, thank you again for being here. Everyone else, have a good week. I believe I will be back next week with another episode of Tech Sales Advice. Have a good week, all. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you.